Okay, so anybody who follows some of the stuff I make actually knows I was dealing with the wheel hub, the rear wheel hub on my SX4, Suzuki SX4, my 2009 all-wheel drive one. The wheel speed sensor is actually integral to the hub itself. So I was actually just doing a wee bit of studying on these and the ABS system on the car in general, actually. I was under the mistaken impression that the hub, the wheel speed sensor, was just a variable reluctance sensor type setup, magnetic wheel and a coil that senses the rotation and picks up the speed. I guess I'm grossly out of date with my concepts on how this actually works, because as far as I can discern, this is actually a diagram of a simplified diagram, I guess. It's actually the diagram right out of the factory manual, so it's the actual working diagram. This actually shows you the ABS module itself, and these are actually the wheel speed sensors. So when I was looking at this diagram, I thought, that's no variable reluctance sensor. There's 12 volts going to one side of the line and a ground on the other. So I'm thinking, as far as I can discern, this is probably a Hall effect sensor. So it actually gives you a little test setup in the manual for how you can actually test the front and rear wheel speed sensors on the bench, or actually on the vehicle, but disconnected at the wheel speed side. So not the frame side of the vehicle or the chassis wiring, but actually isolate the wheel speed sensor itself. So it's a really simple setup. So you disconnect the harness. Here's the hub. I've actually got it on the bench, and I've got it set up for a little demonstration. So there is the connector that they're talking about. So obviously you can disconnect that in situ on the car if in doubt. I think pretty much most people would have most of this stuff. This wee bit misleading, kind of leads you to believe it's just a voltage meter, a DVOM. A little bit more complicated than that. A scope, or at least a graphing meter, would be ideal. Although I suppose you could use the min-max function on a basic, well, a little bit more than a basic DVOM, something with a little bit more advanced min-max features. And the only tricky thing is you may or may not have, item 2 there, is a resistor. A 115 ohm resistor. So that's just a battery, 12 volt battery. You could use the car itself, I suppose. I've got a little 12 volt battery for test purposes on my bench. So although this is a mess and I don't expect you to follow the wiring, there's my resistor. Now, full disclosure, if you look at the color coding, the sharp amongst you will actually see that it's actually 120 ohm resistor, closest I could get. But when I actually checked it on the meter, it actually rings out at 118, so pretty close enough for me. Anyway, I'm going to call that good. So, and the wiring, the massive wiring that's actually on the bench, is actually schematically, for practical purposes, the exact same as the setup here. So you're essentially just running the circuit. So you're running the power, or the negative side of the battery, to the applicable side. You can see how it's actually wired. There is color coding on the wiring side. The wheel hub side of the wiring itself is color coded, so you have to be particular about the polarity and how it's hooked up. But you can see you're just reading the drop across the resistor itself. So yeah, I made the mistaken impression when I checked this, that I could, like I said, I was under the impression it was just a coil. You could maybe check the resistance of the coil itself. No, that's not going to work at all, because as I said, as far as I can tell, it's a Hall effect sensor. So I've got this set up. I'm being long-winded about this, as I usually am, but I'll actually show you what kind of results I get. So it gives you the setup there, gives you a little blurb on it. I'll frame that up for just a second so you can read it if you're really interested. For the SX4 freaks out there, or lab scope freaks that are interested. So there's the setup, and there's the setup. And there's what your waveform should actually look like. Now this is actually with the hub, or the wheel, if it's still on the car, being rotated at a fixed speed. You can see it's got fixed spacing on the pulses there. So that is going to vary depending on how fast you actually rotate the hub itself. And you can see the specs. You can see the specs and how they're actually laid out there. So the low side is somewhere between this value, B, and the high side somewhere between that value. So let's see what we actually get on my setup here. So as I said, I'm not going to be able to show you both at the same time, but I don't think you really need to see me rotating this, right? I've got it pinched in my vise so I can actually rotate it. Of course, the signal is going to leave the setup here, go across the resistor, which I've got set up on my old school Vantage here. I suppose I could set it up on my Pico there for anybody who's interested in seeing that. Just say so in the comments and I'll take the time to actually do it. But for now, I'm pretty happy with this. So this is what makes me think it's a Hall effect, is I can rotate and stop. So there, let me turn this light up and turn this light on. There, I think you can see a wee bit better there. So you can see my setup there. I've actually just got it set up on the graphing meter mode, 0 to 2 volts on a time base of 1 second. So, see that line? There. My display's acting up. That's another video. Trying to fix that one of these days. So there's my minimum value. And again, as per the manual, the minimum value clocks in at between 680 and 960 millivolts. So we're good on that. This hub was changed only because the bearing's gone, nothing to do with the wheel speed sensor. That's why I'm actually making this video. I've got the opportunity to actually bench test a healthy wheel speed sensor. And I can stop at the high value here, if I can get it. There we go. So there's the high. So 1723. And we're within spec there as well. You can see that the high voltage, item A, as opposed to the low item B on the graph there. Again, I'll give you a shot of that for anybody who's interested in the setup. Again, this is right out of the factory manual. And I'll just show you, I'll try and rotate it at a reasonably steady rate. This is a pretty slow rotation. I can't imagine this would be much more than just a couple of kilometers an hour in the car. A couple of miles an hour for those interested in miles an hour. I'll try and rotate it a wee bit faster. Obviously, you know, it's a function of the time base as well that I've got set up, how it's going to graph. But I think you can see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this wheel speed sensor. Okay, that's it. So, anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting. And for anybody who has doubts about the wheel speed sensor, this is how you can actually isolate if you don't have a spare hub, which obviously most people wouldn't unless they've already changed one and hung on to the old one like I'm going to do, to slave it in and check it to confirm that you have a wheel speed sensor failure as opposed to a wiring issue. So you could actually check the function of the hub, the encoder and wheel speed sensor that are integral, so you're not guessing whether it's actually chassis wiring, an issue with the actual ABS control module, or the hub itself. So anyway, I'll leave it at that because I tend to be way too long-winded on these things. Too late, I know. I've already dragged it out for 8.5 minutes. But anyway, that's it. Suzuki SX4 wheel hub, and more specifically the wheel speed sensor function of the hub itself. All right, I'll leave it at that. Thanks. Cheers.